Good night. Welcome. I'm going to get the link and set up. This is Amuna Yisrael, Solonomics 101, the Lev Project. The babies are still settling in town, so you might hear a little baby activity. I might have to move from my chair every so often because you know how they do. But it's been a while since I've been on in the night. But of course, we can't forget the Lev Project. So for those who've been tuning in, we've had our day portion still going. We crossed over from reading from women's history to now, because it's Child Abuse Awareness Month, we've been doing that. So it has been about a week and some change since we've read our brother and elder Lewis Hughes, and now ancestor who has passed on. But we have not forgotten, lest we forget. And it's a place, there's so much going on. I know with you too, I've seen some interest in reading some of these narratives. And so, you know, until we get some people stepping up, we're gonna read it. But I went through. Here's some good news. I'm a little tired, but you already know. Here's some good news. And sometimes we do need to. Somebody says sometimes you get angry, and it's true. I look a little sleepy. Sometimes you get angry, and sometimes you have to take time to process it, because you might go outside and get turned up. You might start merging it all together. So we slow down a little bit and processing a whole lot of stuff and just looking out into society really and seeing how it all connects. It's wild. It connects on so many levels. It's a great thing. I want to shout out to Angel, who's always tuning in and always giving her feedback and sharing it on social media. So for all those who find the value in it and you find it so valuable that you share, I want to say thank you. Didn't I tell you guys early? Better now than before I start. So you guys stay right there and I'll be right back. All right, sorry for the delay. I'm gonna let y'all rock with the picture because I gotta turn this little light off here. It's kind of glaring in my already sleepy eyes. So I want to be able to hang with this reading. So I'm gonna let y'all rock with the picture. I changed it so it's a new picture. So hopefully you guys enjoy. Um, we're gonna start back 30 years a slave from bondage to freedom. Yeah, by the way, we also been doing the review. So shout out to everybody who's been watching on the ground and using your prior knowledge and experience with the slave narratives to compare and kind of analytically assess what we're watching. I'm having a great time with that as well. So efforts, let's get back to how we started, right? Efforts to learn to read and write. That's where we are. And this is why we're doing this LEV project, because our foreparents had to make efforts to learn to read and write. It wasn't something that people just gave to them all willy-nilly. They had to make efforts for this. And so, hold on one second. All right. Let's Lev Project. All right. Thomas, the coachman, and I were fast friends. We used to get together every time we had a chance and talk about freedom. Oh, Tom would say, if I could only write, I remember when Tom first began to take lessons at night from some plasters, workmen on the neighborhood. They saw that he was so anxious to learn that they promised to teach him every evening if he would slip out to their house. I too was eager to learn to read and write, but did not have the opportunity which Tom had of getting out at night. You had to sneak off. Hmm? I had to sleep in the house where the folks were and could not go out without being observed, while Tom had quarters in another part of the establishment and could slip out unobserved. And this is for those who always say the house slave had it better than the field slave. We saw Ernestine's character in Underground speak on this, that she was actually jealous of Pearlie Mae, I think her name is, who's now dead in the series, but she was jealous of her because she had some semblance of freedom. She had some little autonomy. At night they were able to actually be with their families and things of that nature. So he's saying the same thing, that Tom, he was a house slave, quote unquote, and Tom lived not attached to the quarters, and so he could get away, and he didn't have that opportunity. It says, Tom, however, consoled me by saying he would teach me as soon as he knew how. So Tom one night put a copy of some figures on the side of the barn for me to practice them. I took the chalk and imitated him as near as I could, but my work was poor beside his, as he had been learning for some months and could make the figures quite well, write a little. Still, I kept trying. Tom encouraged me and telling me that I would learn in time. Just keep trying, said he. When this first lesson was over, like he's getting, feeling all, it's the first lesson. It didn't even, Tom, okay. Anywho, it says, still I kept trying. Tom encouraging me and telling me that I could learn in time, just keep trying, said he. When this first lesson was over, I forgot to rub out the marks on the barn. And the next morning, when old Master Jack, who happened to be at our home just at that time, went out there and saw the copy of my imitation of it, he at once raised great excitement by calling attention to the rude characters and wanting to know who had done it. You're in trouble for reading and writing. In this case, it wasn't reading, it was writing. This is kind of like how Kizzy got slapped when she was writing her name in charcoal. So old Master Jack is up in arms. Which one of you Negroes is getting some school learning? It says here, who happened to be at our home just at that time, went out there and saw the copy and my imitation of it. He at once raised great excitement by calling attention to the rude characters and wanted to know who had done it. Sorry. I was afraid to own that I had done it, but old Master Jack somehow surmised that it was Tom or I, for he said to Boss, Edmund, you must watch those fellas, Lewis and Thomas. If you don't, they will get spoiled. They are pretty close to town here. Tom and I laughed over this a good deal and how easily we slipped out of it, but concluded not to stop trying to learn all we could. Tom always said, Lou, I'm going to be a free man yet. Then we will need some education. No, let us never stop trying to learn. Tell that to Lou and Tom in 2016, who will forego learning for other activities, let's just say. Lou and I am going to be a free man yet. Then we will need some education. Okay, I said that. Tom was a Virginian as I was and was sold from his parents when a mere lad. Boss used to write to his parents' owners occasionally, that his people might hear from him. The letters were to his mother, but sent in care of the white folks. Tom had progressed very fast in his secret studies and could write enough to frame a letter. It seems it had been over a year since Boss had written for him, but nothing was said until one morning I heard Boss telling Tom to come to the barn to be whipped. He showed Tom 3 letters which he had written to his mother, and this so startled him that he said nothing. I listened breathlessly to each word Boss said. Where did you learn to write, asked he, and when did you learn? How long have you been writing to your mother? At that moment, he produced the 3 letters which Tom had written. Boss, it seems, had mistrusted something and spoke to the postmaster, telling him to stop any letter which Tom might mail for Virginia to his mother. So not only did you not want him to learn to read and write, you also prohibited and blocked correspondence. Like, okay, we want to talk about damage. It's to some high degree that you so much wanted, because we have to remember this is about control. You so much wanted control that you didn't even want him to be in contact with his mother. Him writing a correspondence to his mother, whom he was sold away from, was an offense. Right. It says the postmaster did as directed, for slaves had no rights which postmasters were bound to respect. Hence, the letters fell into the master's hands instead of going to their destination. Tom, not hearing from his first letter, wrote a second, then a third, never dreaming they had been intercepted. Boss raged, and Tom was even severely whipped. After this, nothing Tom did please any of the family. It was a continual pick on him. Everything was wrong with both of us, for they were equally hard on me. They mistrusted, I think, that I could write, yet I could not find out just what they did think. So the Lev Project going strong, 4.5. It's understand that just less than 200 years ago, this was a great offense, because the objective was to keep you in object poverty and object ignorance. And the worst thing that we could continue to do is personally elect and be partakers of our own ignorance when there is no need for. Tom strikes for liberty and gains it. Tom stayed only a few weeks after this. He said to me one morning, Lou, I'm going away. If I can get a boat tonight that is starting off, why, I'm going from this place. I was sad to see him go, for he was like a brother to me. He was my companion and friend. He went and was just in time to catch the boat at the Memphis dock. He succeeded in getting on and made an application to the captain to work on the boat. The captain did not hesitate to employ him, as it was common for slaves to be permitted to hire themselves out for wages which are required to return in whole or in part to their masters. Of course, all such slaves carried a written pass to their effect. Tom was shrewd, and having learned to write fairly well, he wrote himself a pass, which was of the usual kind, stating his name, to whom he belonged, and that he was privileged to hire himself out wherever he could, coming and going as he pleased. Where the slave was an exceptional one, and where the owner had only 2 or 3 slaves, a pass would readily be given to hire himself out or hire his own time, as it was generally called, he being required to turn over his master a certain amount of his earnings each month or week, and to make a report to his master of his whereabouts and receipts. And we heard about that with Venture Smith. We read that narrative some time ago. Venture Smith was talking about how he was trying to buy his freedom. And so they say they own you. And basically, it's like you owning your car and you rent your car out. Or you owning your lawnmower and you rent your lawnmower out. And so they are allowing their property, who they claimed as property, to hire out their own time, only to turn around and pay the master. It says, as it was generally called, he being required to turn over some of the money. Okay, I said that. Sometimes, no, each month or week, and to make a report to his master of his whereabouts and receipts. Sometimes the slave would be required to turn into his master a certain sum of money, as for instance, $50 or $100 a year, and he would have to earn that before he could use any of his earnings for himself. If he was a mechanic, he would have little trouble in doing this, as the wages of much were often quite liberal. This kind of pass was rarely, if ever, given by the planters having large numbers of slaves. So he's saying that certain type of men in certain industries, and I was saying before, and the narratives bear out that the men had more opportunity for running away, because as Lewis Hughes is telling us right now, it wasn't abnormal for them to hire themselves out to be off the plantation, to see beyond the walls of the house. Oftentimes the female, she didn't have that opportunity. Although I was reading in South Carolina, it spoke about the slave market, and in that space, they were able to go to market with some of the overs from their own farm and garden, and the women, and that's another story in itself, but the women were able to go out there to market and sell their goods. And that was something I was reading out of South Carolina. But as of general practice, no, they were kind of constricted to the farm. And so this was the difference and the opportunity that availed itself, contrasting the male and the female. It says, this kind of pass was rarely, if ever, given by the planters having large number of slaves. Another kind of pass read something like this: pass my boy or my girl, as the case might be, the name being attached. These were only given to permit the slave to go from the farm of his own master to that of another. And that is where often they would have the abroad marriages, and they would have the man live on one plantation and the woman live on another. And I think I read the joke of the man who married on another plantation. I read it in I read it before. It was supposed to be a joke. It's in We Was in the Weed, where every time he would give the Europeans a pass, they would laugh. And it says something like, give my man a pass to old Sally's black blink blank blank. You know, they was talking rude and crude about his abroad marriage and the reason why he was on the road. Sometimes for women, like we said, if they're going to market or if they're a midwife, they will have passes to travel. It's kind of like a driver's license. You get pulled, it's like, where's your driver's license, your permit to be on the road? Nothing much has changed. As the case might be, the same being attached. These were only given to permit the slave to go from the farm of his own master to that of another. Some men had wives or children belonging on neighboring farms, same thing, abroad marriages, and would be given passes to visit them. We just spoke on that. Without such a pass, they were liable to be stopped and turned back to their homes. There was, however, a good deal of visiting without passes, but it was against the general rule which required them, and any slave leaving home without a pass was liable to punishment if discovered. Kind of like a ticket if they find you in the outside without your driver's license. On our plantation, passes were never given, but the slaves did visit in the neighborhood, notwithstanding, and would sometimes slip into town at night. Tom had in this way seen the pass of a neighboring slave to hire out, and it was from this he learned the form from which he wrote his, and which opened his way to freedom. Upon reading Tom's pass, the captain did not hesitate, but hired him at once, and Tom worked his way to New Orleans, to which city the boat was bound. In the meantime, Boss took me and we drove to numerous stations where he telegraphed ahead for his runaway boy Tom. But Tom reached New Orleans without hindrance, and there fell in with the steward of a Boston steamer, and getting aboard of it was soon on the ocean. On his way to that city where were so many friends of the slave, arriving there, he made his way to Canada, which was for so many generations the only land of freedom attainable to American slaves. So his homeboy Tom, he plotted his way all the way out, and like they would say, Providence, by the providence of God, they would say oftentimes, Tom escaped without hindrance. So news of Tom reaching Canada. Now that Tom was gone, excitement prevailed at the house among the white folks. Nothing had been heard of him or the method of his escape. All the servants expected that he would be caught, and I was alarmed every time Boss came from the city, fearing that he had news that Tom was caught. He had been gone about 6 months, when one morning I went to the post office and brought back a letter. It seemed to me that I felt that it contained something unusual, but I did not know what it was. It proved to be a letter from Tom to Boss. Yo, Tom got bright. I'm sorry. They did not intend that the servants would know it was from Tom, but one of the housemaids heard them reading it and came out and told us. She whispered, Tom is free. He has gone to Canada. Boss read in the letter Lou brought. This news cheered me and made me eager to get away, but I never heard from him anymore until after the rebellion. Tom gone made my duties more. I now had to drive the carriage, but Uncle Madison was kept at the barn to do the work there and hitch up the team. I only had to drive when the family went out. McGee expects to capture Tom. In the summer, the McGees made up their mind to go down east and come around the Niagara Falls, for this was the place from which Tom had written them. Boss had great confidence in himself and did not doubt his ability to take Tom home with him if he should meet him, even though it should be in Canada. So he took a pair of handcuffs with him. Can you believe this stuff, man? These people, this is why sometimes you do need a little break. As preparation for the enterprise, his young nephew had been in Niagara Falls and seen and talked with Tom, but Boss said if he had seen him anywhere, he would have laid hands on him at once and taken him home at all hazards. So you see how far there's a Caribbean saying that thief no likes a thief with long bag. So one thief doesn't like to see the success, a long bag, that other thief is successful. And one thief doesn't like to see another thief successful. Now, the original thieves go through all of these matters of which to secure stolen property. And he left from clear down where he was. I think, where did they move now? They passed New Orleans. I think they're in Kentucky. And he goes all the way to Niagara Falls to bring back what he is saying are stolen goods because Tom stole himself away from the master. I'm just thinking about the thought process and how the ego is something. But let's continue. It's not like these people sold themselves into your hands or into your clutches in that way. You understand that they profited or anything of that nature. You actually stole them. And now you're going to, some lengths. This is kind of like the story of Linda Brent or Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Kind of the same thing where Mr. Brent, he's just like all over the place trying to find her for years. This dude is relentless. He won't give up. But anyway, making clothes. When the family went on, thank you everybody for just joining us. I'm sorry. We're reading. I know it's been a while. Please bear with me. We got the Lev Project going, but it's in different areas. We diversifying. So we're still in 30 Years a Slave from Bondage to Freedom with Lewis Hughes right now, and we're reading Making Clothes. When the family went on this visit down east, I was left in charge of the house and was expected to keep everything in order and also to make the winter clothes for the farm hands. The madame and I had cut out these clothes before she left, and it was my principal duty to run the sewing machine in their manufacture. Many whole days I spent in this work. My wife made the buttonholes and sewed on the buttons. I made hundreds of sacks for use in picking cotton. The work was always done in summer. When the garments were all finished, they were shipped to the farm at Bolivar to be ready for the fall and winter wear. In like manner, the clothes for summer use were made in the winter. Because remember, all of this stuff is in-house. A superstition he remembers. It says, it was the custom in those days for slaves to carry voodoo bags. Here we go. It was handed down from generation to generation, so they still didn't stop that. I think we read that. We also read that in Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. And though it was one of the superstitions of a barbarous ancestry, it was still very generally and tenaciously held to by all classes. Him, Lewis, carried a little bag, which I got from an old slave who claimed that it had power to prevent anyone who carried it from being whipped. It was made of leather and contained roots, nuts, pines, and some other things. The claim that it would prevent the folks from being whipping me was so much I found was not sustained by my experience. So he's carrying this bag and he was like, it's supposed to stop people from being whipped. But as we remember, he ran away and he did get whipped, so it didn't work. Many of the servants were thorough believers in it, though, and carried these bags all the time. So they're still trying to, in a way, tap into their rememberings of certain ancestral spiritual practices, let's just say. And according to Lewis, he's saying it didn't work for him. Memphis and its commercial importance. The city of Memphis, from its high bluff on the Mississippi, overlooks the surrounding country from a long distance. The muddy waters of the rivers, when at low stage, lap the ever-crumbling banks that yearly change, yielding to new deflections of the current. For hundreds of miles, not 400, but 400 of miles below, there is highly interesting and rarely broken series of forests, cane brakes, and sandbars, covered with masses of willows and poplars, which in the spring, when the flood comes down, are overflowed for many miles back. It was found necessary to run embankments practically parallel with the current in order to confine the water of the river in its channel. Memphis was and is the most important city of Tennessee, indeed the most important between St. Louis and New Orleans. Particularly from commercial point of view, cotton was the principal product of the territory tributary to it. The street running along the bluff was called Front Row and was filled with stores and business houses. The street was the principal cotton market, and here the article, which in those days was personified as the commercial king, quote unquote, was bought and sold. And that's why they had a saying cotton is king. And hence it was shipped or stored awaiting an advancing price. Everybody wanted cotton, they wanted clothing, they wanted many suits of apparel, and they were doing it on the backs. All of these fancy clothes that you're seeing at a certain time, coming out of England, you know, coming out of these places, the big flowing dresses, you know, to make a really, because I haven't sewn in a really long time, but I sew, right? So to make a big flowing dress, do you know how many yards of fabric you need? Depends on if you're going to have flouncing and frills at the bottom with long sleeves. And you need a lot of material. And this material was being picked by hand and processed by people who did not wear it. And if they did wear it, they wore the dregs or what was left back, the salvage, the refuse. Deep. And why do quote unquote black people now are like so caught up on name brands and clothes, and when they get money they take you on, you know, the shows where this is my house and they have 50 million shoes and a whole closet of clothes. Something is going on there. I'm just saying. The completion of the Memphis and Charleston Railroad was a great event in the history of the city. It was termed the marriage of Mississippi and the Atlantic and was celebrated with a great popular demonstration, people coming from the surrounding country for many miles. Water was brought from the Atlantic Ocean and poured into the river, and water taken from the river and poured into the Atlantic at Charleston. It was anticipated that the railroad connection between the two cities would make Charleston the great shipping port, and of Memphis the principal cotton market of the Southwest. The expectation is neither of these cases has been fully realized. Boss, in common with planters and businessmen throughout that whole region, was greatly excited. I attended him and thus had the opportunity of witnessing the notable celebration. So you got to remember, America is budding at this time. It's like a young child, you know, just formulating 1600s, then the 1700s, and America is stepping into their britches and becoming industrial and really spreading their wings, so to say, of course, on the backs of others. And so all these little accomplishments add up to what America is today. It says, or let's just say, not really accomplishments, but you understand what I'm saying. These commercial exploits, let's just say that. We're up to chapter 3, slavery and the war of the rebellion. Let me go ahead and check to see. I haven't been checking. Let me check to see if we have any questions at this time before we go a little bit. I'm gonna try to catch up here because we've been away for some time. This is our 66th installment of the Lev Project. I mean, and I counted the preface of the project, which was a few videos. Yes, Kane, our angel cells in school, we used to get hall passes. That's true. And if you're in the hall without a pass, it's the same. Oh, man, thank you, Angel. That's the same thought process, too. Like, who gave you permission to be in this space? And if you don't have the hall pass, they send you back. So, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. What was I going to say? I forget. Let's continue reading until I remember. Oh, we're on the 66th installment, including the preface videos that we did. So can you imagine that? 66 installments of the Lev Project. The last time I checked, we were up to like 64.5 hours collectively over the last 4.5 months. Praise be to the Most High. And after this, we got to know something. We'll never look at slavery as just this ambiguous, arbitrary, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Abstract institution again. We will be, I think, more educated than a mass majority of both quote unquote black and white and other nationalities on this subject. So praise be to the Most High. That is the goal. That is the objective. We're taking it into our own hands. Slavery and the War of the Rebellion. Beginning of the war. This is chapter 3. I remember well when Abraham Lincoln was elected. Boss and the madam had been reading the papers when he broke out with an exclamation, the very idea of electing an old rail splitter into the presidency of the United States. Well, he'll never take his seat. When Lincoln was inaugurated, Boss, Old Master Jack, and a great company of men met at our house to discuss the matter, and they were wild with excitement. Was not this excitement an admission that their confidence in their ability to whip the Yankees 5 or 6 to 1 was not so strong as they pretended? The war had been talked of for some time, but at last it came. And when the rebels fired up upon Fort Sumter, then great excitement arose. The next day, when I drove Boss to town, he went into the store of one Williams, a merchant. And when he came out, he stepped to the carriage and said, "What do you think? Oh, Abraham Lincoln has called for 400,000 men to come to Washington immediately. Well, let them come. We will make a breakfast of them." So this is infighting right here, the North versus the South. This is what his master is saying at the time. I could whip 6 Yankees with my pocket knife. This was the chief topic everywhere. Soon after this, Boss bought himself a 6-shooter. I had to mold the bullets for him, and every afternoon he would go out to practice. By his direction, I fixed a large piece of white paper on the back fence, and in the center of it put a large black dot. At this mark, he would fire away, expecting to hit it, but he did not succeed well. He would sometimes miss the fence entirely, the ball going out into the woods beyond. Each time he would shoot, I would have to run down to the fence to see how near he came to the mark. When he came very near to it, within an inch or so, he would say laughingly, "Ah, I would have got him that time," meaning a Yankee soldier. There was something very ludicrous in this pistol practice of a man who boasted that he would whip 6 Yankees with his jackknife. He's like, "Hold up, why you got a gun? I thought you was cool with the knife." Every day for a month, this business so tiresome to me went on. Boss was very brave until it came time for him to go to war. When his courage oozed out and he sent a substitute, he remaining at home as a quote unquote home guard. One day when I came back with the papers from the city, the house was soon ringing with cries of victory. Boss said, "Why, that was a great battle at Bull Run. If our men had only known at first what they afterwards found out, they would have whipped all them Yankees out and succeeded in taking Washington." Petty disrespect to the emblem of the Union. By the way, also, I know I said it before, April, the governor of Mississippi declared April the Confederate Heritage. What is it? I don't want to misquote him. It's like Confederate Heritage Month. So this is what we're reading about the Confederacy, that who succeeded from the Union, the South, the Confederate flag, Ku Klux Klan, that association. Well, in Mississippi, they're paying homage to the Confederacy this month. Petty disrespect to the emblem of the Union. Right after the bombardment of Fort Sumter, they brought to Memphis the Union flag that floated over the fort. There was a great jubilee in celebration of this. Portions of the flag, no larger than $50 in paper money, were given out to the wealthy people, and these evidences of their treason was long preserved as precious treasures. Boss had one of these pieces which he kept a long time. But as the rebel cause waned, these reminders of its beginning were less and less seen. And if any of them were now in existence, it is not likely that their possessors would take any pride in exposing them to view. As the war continued, we would now and then hear of some slave of our neighborhood running away to the Yankees. It was common when the message of a Union victor came to see the slaves whispering to each other, "We will be free." I tried to catch everything I could about the war. I was so eager for the success of the Union's cause. These things went until, okay, and he just stopped mid sentence. The Battle of Shiloh, April 9th, 1862. Boss came hurrying in one morning right after breakfast, calling me, Lou, come. We have a great victory. I want to go up and carry the boys something to eat. I want you and Matilda to get something ready as quickly as you can. A barrel of flour was rolled into the kitchen, and my wife and I pinched it in to work. Biscuit, bread, whole cakes, ham, tongue, all kinds of meat. Bread was rapidly cooked, and though the task was a heavy one for my wife and me, we worked steadily, and about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the things were ready. On the large baskets used to hold, sorry, one of the large baskets used to hold cotton was packed full of these provisions. Our limbs ached from the strain of the work, for we had little help. One reason for the anxiety of Boss for the preparation of this provision for the soldiers was that he knew so many in one of the companies, which was known as the Como Avengers. End quote. And he had a son, a nephew, and a brother of his wife connected with it. The later, a major on General Martin's staff. On the following morning, I got up early and hurried with my work to get through, as I had to go to the post office. Madame hurried me off as she expected a letter from her husband, who had promised to write at the earliest moment of their friends and relatives. I rushed into the city at full speed, got some letters and a morning paper, and returned as rapidly as possible and gave them to her. She grasped them eagerly and commenced reading the paper. In a short time, I heard her saying, calling me to come to her. I went in and she said in great excitement, Louis, oh, this is the woman who was abusing him, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, but Louis, we want to have you drive us into town to see the Yankee prisoners who are coming through at noon from Shiloh. I went and told Madison to hitch up as soon as he could. In the meantime, I got myself ready, and it was not long before we were off for the city. The madame was accompanied by a friend of hers, a Mrs. Oliver. We were at the station in plenty of time. About 12 o'clock, the train from Shiloh drew into the station, but the prisoners that were reported to be on board were missing. It proved to be a false report. While they were looking for prisoners, Miss Oliver saw Jack, a servant of Edward McGee, brother of Madame. Oh, look, and said Mrs. Oliver, there is Edward Jack. Lou ran and called him. In a minute, I was off the carriage, leaving the reins in Madame's hands. Jack came up to the carriage, and the women began to question. Where is your master, Ed? Asked both of them. He is in the car, missus. He is shot in the ankle, said Jack. In a minute, the women were crying. I was going to get a hack, said Jack, too. No, no, said both of them. Go, Lou, and help Jack to bring him to our carriage. You can drive him more steadily than the hackman. Jack and I went to the car and helped him out, and after some effort, got him into our carriage. Then I went and got a livery hack to take the women and his baggage back. When we reached home, we found there old Mrs. Jack McGee, mother of the madame, Mrs. Charles Dandridge, Mrs. Farrington, sisters of madame, and Fanny, a colored woman, Edward's housekeeper, and a mistress, a wife in all but name. All of these had come to hear the news of the great battle, for all had near relatives in it. Mrs. Jack McGee and Mrs. Dr. Charles Dandridge had each a son in the terrible conflict. So they used to make sport of this kind of stuff, the same way they used to make sport of the whippings or hangings. They made it like they announced it, and we read that in another narrative where he said hundreds of people came around, and these dudes was out there eating and drinking and actually having, that's what they could say. They said that the word picnic, pick a nigga, comes from these gatherings that they would have outdoors to watch public execution. Alrighty then. How do you eat and drink? Anyway, morning in Master's family. If you give me one moment, I'm going to go get a little something to drink here. And then we shall come back and see what happened in Master's family here. I'll be right back. All right. Thank you for your patience. Had to get some more water. Morning in Master's family. In the afternoon, when all were seated in the library reading, and I was in the dining room finishing up my work, I happened to look out the window and saw a messenger coming up the gravel walk. I went out to meet him. Telegram from Mr. McGee. Mrs. McGee, he said. I took it to her, and reading it without a word, she passed it to the next member of the family, and so it was passed around until all had read it except Mrs. Dandridge. When it was handed to her, I saw at a glance that it contained for her the most sorrowful tidings. As she read, she became livid, and when she had finished, she covered her face with her handkerchief, giving a great heavy sob. By this time, the whole family was crying and screaming. Oh, our Mac is killed. Mars Mac is killed, was echoed by the servants in tones of heartfelt sorrow, for he was an exceptional young man. Everyone loved him, both whites and blacks. The affection of the slave for him bordered on reverence, and this was true not alone of his father's slaves, but of all those who knew him. This telegraph was from Boss and announced that he would be home the next day with the remains. Mrs. Farrington at once wrote to old Master Jack and to Dr. Dandridge telling them of Mac's death and to come at once. After I mailed those letters, nothing unusual happened during the afternoon, and the house was wrapped in silence and gloom. On the following morning, I went for the mail as usual, but there was nothing new. At noon, the remains of much loved young man arrived at our station, accompanied by Boss and Dr. Henry Dandridge, brother of the father of the deceased, who was a surgeon in the rebel army. I went to the station with another servant to assist to bringing the body to the house. We carried it into the back parlor, and after all had been made ready, we proceeded to wash and dress it. So they just had you be everything. Now you the mortician. Um, he had lain on the battlefield 2 days before he was found, and his face was black as a piece of coal. But Dr. Henry Dandridge, with his ready tact, suggested the idea of painting his face, because it was black because of him being lined out in the field. I'm gonna leave that one. With his ready tact, suggested the idea of painting it. I was there to assist in whatever way they needed me. After the body was all dressed, the face was painted, cheeks tinted with a rosy hue to appear as he always did in life. The look was natural and handsome. We were all the afternoon employed in this sad work, and it was not until late in the evening that his father and mother came down to view the body for the first time. I remember as they came down the broad stairs together, the sorrow-stricken yet calm look on those two people. Mrs. Dandridge was very calm. Her grief was too great for her to scream, as the others did when they went in. She stood and looked at her Mac. Then turning to Boss, she said, Cousin Eddie, how brave he was. He died for his country. Poor, sorrowing, misguided woman. It was not for his country he died, but for the perpetuation of the cruel, the infamous system of human slavery. All the servants were allowed to come and view the body. Many sad tears were shed by them. Some of the older slaves clasped their hands as in mute prayer, and exclaimed as they passed by the coffin, he was a loving boy. It seemed that all his company put five or six, sorry, it seemed all that all his company but 5 or 6 were killed. At an early hour next morning, the funeral party started from the home of Panola, where the body of the lamenting young man, sacrificed to an unholy cause, was buried at the close of the same day. Edward stayed at our house some 6 weeks. His ankle was so slow in getting well. At the end of that time, he could walk with the aid of crutches, and he took Fanny and went home. And then now we're up to alarm of the Memphis rebels. So he's doing this during the Civil War now. So it's coming to the end of slavery. Not long after this, the people were very much worked up over the military situation. The Yankees had taken Nashville and began to bombard Fort Pillow. The officials of the Memphis and Ohio Railroad Company became alarmed at the condition of things. Fearing for the safety of their stock, the officers therefore set about devising some plan by which they might get the cars down on the Memphis and Jackson Road, where they imagined their property would be safe from the now terrible Yankees. The railroad officials at once set to work to buy the right of way through Main Street to give them the connection with the Southern Road name. At first, it was refused by the city authorities, but finally the right of the way was granted. When, however, the railroad men began to slay the tiles and rails, the people grew furious. Some fled at once, for they imagined that this act of the railroad officials indicated that the Yankees must be coming pretty near. Boss became so excited at this time that he almost felt like going away too. The family grew more and more uneasy. I thought he said he was going to get at these dudes with a pocket knife. I don't understand, bossy. But anywho, he says, and it was in it, and it was the continual talk. We must get away from Memphis. The companies are, are already moving their rolling stock, fearing the Yankees may come at any time and destroy everything. We must get away, said Boss, speaking to Madame. So dude looking to skip town. The family flee from Memphis. Things continued in this way until about June 1862. The Union troops had taken Fort Pillow. We had heard the firing of cannon and did not know what it meant. One morning I was in the city after the mail and I learned that a transient boat had just come down the river, which had lost a part of her wheelhouse. She was fired on from Fort Pillow, sustaining this serious damage from the shot. This increased the excitement among the people, and our folks became alarmed right away and commenced talking of moving and running the servants away from the Yankees to a place of safety. McGee was trying for some time to get someone to take the house, that is, to live in and care for it until after the war, while the family were gone. Like, dude trying to skip town and get somebody to maintain his joint till he come back. I can't. They never thought that slavery would be abolished and so hoped to come back again. And this is why that's what gave rise to the Ku Klux Klan, because a lot of these slave masters ran away, not thinking that this was going to happen, as he just said. And when they felt disenfranchised, or when they felt that they were robbed, or they were owed this property, and people unrightfully freed their slaves, they retaliated in white coats and all kind of other tyranny. It says, after some research, they found a widow, a Mrs. Hancock. She was to have full charge of the house and continue keeping boarders, as she had been doing in Memphis. The vaunted courage of this man seems to have early disappeared, and this thought was chiefly devoted to getting his family and his slaves into some obscure place, as far away as possible from the Yankees that were to be so easily whipped. He's making fun now. We were about 2 weeks getting ready to leave, stowing away some of the things they didn't want to move. The boss and his family, my wife and I, and all the house servants were to go to Panola to his father's. The family went by rail, but I had to drive through in a wagon. I am taken to the Bolivar farm. So like he's saying, he's making fun. This boss guy, man, he's all like, yeah, he had all his mouth until he ain't had no mouth no more. Now he's retreating. So I am taken to the Bolivar farm. Soon after the family all reached Mrs. Master Jack's, boss took me to his own farm in Bolivar County. This separated me from my wife This separated me for a time from my wife, for she remained with the family. I had to look after the house at the farm, attending the dining room, and between meals sew every day. So he was a tailor and everything else. Making clothes for the hands, I could run on the machine 8 to 20 pairs of pants a day, but 2 women made the buttonholes and did the basting for me, getting the goods all ready for the machine. Capture of Union trading boats or boat. He says, the Yankees had made a raid through Bolivar before I came, and the excitement had not abated as they were spreading themselves all through the state. There was a Union trading boat, the Lake City, that had been successful in exchanging her goods for cotton that came from Memphis. She usually stopped at Helena, Friars Point, and other small towns, but on a trip at this time, she came about right at Boss's farm. She was loaded with all kinds of merchandise, sugar, tobacco, liquor, etc. She had a crew of about 40 men. But it's funny how they call boats. They give boats a feminine characteristic. I don't know. I was just how he was just calling the boat a she. But they were all not well prepared for a vigorous defense. The rebel soldiers stationed in the vicinity saw her as she dropped her anchor near the landing, and they determined to make an effort for her capture. They put out pickets just above our farm and allowed no one to pass or stop to communicate with the boat. Everyone that sought to pass was held prisoner, and every precaution taken to prevent those on the boat from learning of the purposes of the rebels, knowing that the boat would land in the morning, if not informed of the danger, and then it was anticipated that they could easily make her prize. There was a small ferry boat behind the steamer, and as the latter dropped downstream, stream, and then steamed up to the landing, the former stood off from a few moments. As the steamer touched shore, the rebels charged on her and captured her without a struggle. In the meantime, the ferry boat, seeing what had happened, sped away upstream, and the soldiers firing at her, but doing little damage except the breaking of glass in the pilot house. So it's war, you know. The rebels seeing that okay, I said that. No, I didn't. The rebels seeing that the ferry boat had escaped them turned their attention to the unloading of the steamer. They sent out for help in this work, and summons was answered by neighbors far and near. Wagons were brought, two of which were from our farm and loaded with goods, which were taken to Deer Creek, 40 miles from Carson Landing. What goods they found themselves unable to carry away were packed in a warehouse. The steamer was then burned. McGee was present, and the rebel captain gave him a written statement of the affair to the effect that the residents were not responsible for it and that this should be a protection from them against the Union forces. The officers and crew of the steamer, to the number of 40 men, were made prisoners and taken to Deer Creek, the rebel headquarters of that region, and put in jail there. The ferry boat had escaped, went to Helena, Arkansas, and carried the news of the affair to the Union forces there. And so we're reading some war records here. He's giving us some intel, some history books. You know, you hear about the Civil War. Well, he's giving us some history on the Civil War. And so we're going to pick up next time at Boss taken prisoner. That's an interesting place to pick up. It seemed like Boss had gotten hemmed up. And the next time we pick up, most I willing, we're going to see that the boss was taken prisoner, and we're going to find out what happened to him. So I want to thank you for tuning in. We're almost through with this book. I know we have been taking our time, but it's all good. As we're learning and growing, that's what matters. And so I want to thank you, everybody, for tuning in. My name is Amuna Yisrael, and this has been the Lev Project, Solonamis 101. This is the night version, right? So this is 30 Years a Slave, From Bondage to Freedom by Hughes. So until next time, everybody have a blessed night. Let me make sure I didn't miss any comments before I go. And I didn't. So everybody have a blessed night. And we shall, most I willing. Oh yeah, tomorrow's Wednesday. So check out Underground and let us know your thoughts and how you're processing what it is that you're watching. Shalom.